blockchain? It is, like the words already indicate, it is a chain of blocks. But it's a digital chain of blocks. And in every block, there's data. And that data represents a ledger. And that ledger, that can represent something. That data that we can use to record ownership. And we can have numerous applications for that. Now, these blocks, they are generated at a specific time. And every time that a block is created, then there's new transactions in there. And the transactions represent the changes of the ownership within those blocks. So eventually, if you have a block after a block after a block that is referring to another one, then you get a chain of blocks. And that chain of blocks, if you would put it in one place, then there would be only one place that can confirm what's in that blockchain. But actually, with a blockchain, it's so interesting that we can send it around. We can distribute it. And this is what makes it decentralized. So we do not need a central authority because we can send the blockchain around. Now the question should be, why should we care? What does that mean? So it means that we can actually cut out the middlemen in some business processes. And if we cut out the middlemen, then what happens is that we can save time and that we can often also be much faster. The data that's recorded in a blockchain is immutable. You cannot change it anymore because it was distributed. And if it's immutable, then we can use it to record a value or to record ownership of something. And it is distributed, so that means that we do not have to depend on one central party, which is often currently the case if we talk about currencies, but also about business processes. So, okay, a little bit more concrete, then what could we use that for, this blockchain? We can use it to record any kinds of immutable items. Well, what could that be? So immutable, things that we cannot change. And these are examples. We could record pieces of our identity on a blockchain. But we could also record pieces of land on a blockchain so that people can prove that they own a specific type of land. We can record collectibles on it because there's just one of a kind. And most interestingly of all, or at least the one that we all know, is currency. Obviously, we can record currency on this digital blockchain. And this is, of course, bringing me to the next point, and that is Bitcoin, because if we can record ownership on a blockchain, then let's start with the most interesting one of all. Let's start with currency. So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin was the first digital currency using a blockchain to record the ownership. It was created in 2009, and that is not really coincidence, because if we look close to this date, it is just after 2008 where the economic crisis happened. And that is just after banks were bailed out, US banks were bailed out with 700 billion rescue plan. So Bitcoin was created by Satoshi Nakamoto, which is a pseudonym of somebody that nobody knows yet. So nobody knows the creator of Bitcoin. He wrote a white paper which is called a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It is about, I'm not really sure anymore, about 20 pages. It's not very long. And in that white paper, it is perfectly defined how Bitcoin is supposed to work, how transactions need to be confirmed, when new Bitcoin is created, and how it can be sent around. He set a maximum supply of 21 million Bitcoin. And this is where my first aha moment came in. Because if there's a maximum supply, then that has implications for inflation. with our normal currencies, we can generate as much as we want. But with Bitcoin, that's not the case. There's a maximum supply of 21 million Bitcoin. And currently, we are around 17 million. But if there are 21 million Bitcoin, or if that's the limit, and we are billions of people in the world, then how can the world work with 21 million only? Well, every Bitcoin can be split in 100 million Satoshis. So these Satoshis are like cents, but they're much smaller than cents. Every Bitcoin can be split in 100 millionth. So also when you buy Bitcoin or transact Bitcoin, you don't have to send a full Bitcoin. You can just send OSPOT 0001 Bitcoin. And Bitcoin offers us a global alternative to the current monetary system, which actually is a monopoly by governments. And that's interesting, because that's an experiment that we didn't have before. Bitcoin is 24/7. With normal cash transactions, we're dependent on banks, and banks have opening times. They are closed at night, they're closed at weekend, they're closed on holidays, exactly. And it's actually surprising that in some cases, if you want to give somebody money, it's easier to actually go to them than to wire it by bank. Although it all happens electronically, it can still take up to 2 or 3 days to have a cash settlement. So even here, if I from Switzerland would make a transaction from Switzerland to Ghana, I would be quicker just flying here with the money. And that's surprising, isn't it? So Bitcoin wants to change that. And the system is open 24/7. The question that many people ask in the first place is the intrinsic value. What is the intrinsic value of Bitcoin? Because our national currencies have intrinsic value, don't they? Or don't they? There is no intrinsic value of Bitcoin. So I'm sorry to say that. But I'm also sorry to say that our national currencies that we are using today also have no intrinsic value. Actually, people usually think that there is some link to gold. But actually the UK stopped using the gold standard in 1931. And the US did the same in 1933. So that means that all the currencies that we are using, they are based on trust. And what kind of trust? The trust that we can use that currency to buy future items. That the purchasing power of that currency will remain stable. And that is very interesting. So, if there is no intrinsic value, then is it real money? And what does it take to be real money? Real money must have some properties, and those are listed over here. It must be fungible, and fungible means that it is inter-exchangeable. Like if you have a dollar, it can be exchanged for another dollar, and it doesn't have any change. You wouldn't recognize any difference between the $2. They have the same kind of value. It should be non-consumable, because if you can eat it, then it's gone. It should be portable, so that you can take it with you. It should be durable, so that not after 1 or 2 years, your currency is suddenly gone. It should be divisible, so that you can change it to the exact worth of something that you want to transact for. It should be secure, that it cannot be easily stolen. It should be transactable, so that you can make trade with it. And it should be scarce, so that it keeps value. Now that's a lot of properties, isn't it? So let's have a look how gold, traditional currency, and Bitcoin are scoring on all these items. So first, gold. Of course, gold it is fungible, we cannot eat it, it is durable, it is scarce. I think this is like the main reason why people want gold. It is scarce. But it is not very divisible, and it's not very portable. You don't walk with a stack of gold in your pocket, right? And it's hard to buy a cup of coffee with that. So for that, we actually have created our traditional currencies. For that, we have made traditional currencies that are much more portable. And, well, they are quite durable, they are quite divisible, and they are quite secure. But also there we can, of course, debate that it is possible to make some fake currency. But there's this red mark over here that says it's not scarce. And that's true. Because our central banks, they can print as much of it as they want. Now what does that mean? So, if we look at Bitcoin, it actually has all these items. It is fungible, it is very durable, it is very secure, and it is scarce because there's only 21 million of them. But, Casper, the price volatility of Bitcoin, it was crazy. We cannot make transactions for that. Well, and I have to agree with you that the volatility of the price of Bitcoin has been enormous. There's few people that would have expected that the price of Bitcoin would spike to these heights in 2017. So at the beginning, this is only showing a period of 2 years. We're beginning here at the beginning of 2017, and we're now at April 18. So we're looking at 16 months. And at the beginning of 2017, one Bitcoin was still worth around $1,000. Then in summertime, we already reached close to $5,000. And then by the end of the year, it spiked to $20,000. And currently, one Bitcoin is worth around $7,000. So I agree with people that say, well, it's so volatile, we cannot really use it. But I anticipate that in the future there will be less volatility, and as Bitcoin will grow and will become mature, this volatility will change. What I observed in this picture is that the price went up very quick, and then it went down quite slow. And usually, if you look at stock markets, it's a little bit the other way around. Usually, stocks take like 6 or 10 years to go up, and then only a few days or weeks to crash down. And with Bitcoin, it's a little bit the other way around. Now, let's have a look at the big picture of it all, because some things are very confusing. We talk about Bitcoin, we talk about blockchain, we talk about ICOs, and we talk about cryptocurrencies. How does this all fit in? So at the top, I would like to mention DLT, which stands for Distributed Ledger Technology, which is, again, a main item, so a higher item actually, and blockchain is part of DLT. But we can see this as blockchain. And then blockchain applications we can split between with currency and without currency. If we look at blockchain applications without currency, then the company IBM is a very good example. IBM is having lots of applications for blockchain, and one of them that I've recently looked at is for food safety. So we could record food properties on a blockchain so that we can actually prove where food is coming from, and that we don't have to trust a central authority to do that. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the ones with currencies. And then with currencies, we have payment tokens, utility tokens, and asset tokens. Payment tokens are the ones that are really just for making transactions. Utility tokens are tokens for which you can actually use a certain service or get play a game or so. And an asset token is backed by an actual asset. So that one could be backed by gold, for example. So the examples below here, payment token could be Bitcoin, but there's other ones as well. Then a utility token that could be, for example, a music coin, so that a musician is offering a piece of music at a certain coin, and someone else is then listening to that music and pays that coin. And the asset tokens, the example was recently of the petrol in Venezuela to make a cryptocurrency that was linked to the Venezuelan petrol. Now, I show you that these payment tokens, utility tokens, asset tokens have been defined by the FINMA, which is our financial authority in Switzerland, but worldwide I see that other regulators are also looking at cryptocurrencies like this. They are splitting them between payment tokens, utility tokens, and asset tokens, because it has implications for anti-money laundering and for security laws. So this is relevant. Then when we talk about cryptocurrencies, we actually talk about the whole of these three buckets. With currency, all of these things are cryptocurrencies because they represent something that we can make a transaction with. Then ICOs, maybe later today we will talk about ICOs, our initial coin offerings. They usually only appear in utility tokens and asset tokens. And now I would like to talk about a few forces that are working on Bitcoin, because we just looked at the economic part of it, but there's a lot of other parts that are also playing a role, of course. So in the first place, we have technical factors. The way that Bitcoin works with miners that are confirming transactions is something that is a little bit too complicated to explain during this presentation. But there are some limits to it. For example, the size or the number of transactions that we can store, that we can fit in every block of the blockchain is fixed. And therefore, currently, Bitcoin is reaching its limits. It already did actually in December. And there has been many debates about if they should increase the block size or not. And Bitcoin Cash, maybe you've heard of it, is the result of that. Bitcoin Cash has bigger blocks. So Bitcoin, the traditional blockchain, has blocks in a size of 1 megabyte. And within 1 megabyte, there fit about 2,000 transactions. And Bitcoin Cash has 8 megabyte blocks, so it fits about 8 times as much transactions. That has implications for the scalability of the system. If we would not have enough scalability options, then everybody can use it, right? We cannot use it as a worldwide system. So that is among the technical factors. Then the economic factors, well, obviously, we have all seen already that the price is going up and down because of expectations, and because people are investing because they think that Bitcoin is going to be great in the future. Then we have emotional factors like the trust, what I referred to in the beginning. There's a lot of people that just don't really trust it. They don't have the same emotions with Bitcoin as they have with their traditional currencies. And then we have legal factors, which is, of course, a very tricky part of it, because Is it legal? Our laws have not been written in times where something like Bitcoin was existing, so it is only sensible that Bitcoin doesn't fit in current laws. But for that, is it directly illegal? And also regulations. According to regulations, Bitcoin doesn't really fit in the current regulations, but does it mean that something is wrong with it, or that we need to adjust our regulations? And that is something that we see currently happening. We see that around the world, governments are trying to understand what it really is, what it can do, and try to make it work with regulations as well. Some countries are very hard, like China. They try to put a ban on a few things, like cryptocurrency exchanges and on ICOs. But other countries are very open. They would like to open the discussion with the community to try to make the right kind of regulations. And this is something that I see happening in Switzerland. Instead of trying to block it, they try to embrace it. So, when I referred to trust before, I really feel that what happens with Bitcoin is a balancing act. We either trust in governments and use our traditional currencies because we believe that they're managed in a good way. Or if governments misuse our trust, then we have an alternative. Then we could go into Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency. So if governments make wrong steps, then technology will win of it. And therefore, I think that cryptocurrencies are not really winning, but governments are losing. And this is a quote that comes from the end of 2017. And currently, it's a little bit the opposite again, of course, because cryptocurrencies are losing a bit of their value. But actually, during time, they are still improving their technology. They're making more technological improvements. So I think that in the future we will see again a rise of other cryptocurrencies, maybe, and maybe of Bitcoin as well. Now I'm a bit confused. I would like to show, if the time still allows, I think we should, because I wanted to make a workshop tomorrow about the technical implications and about all the advantages and disadvantages of Bitcoin. First, the advantages of Bitcoin. So it claims to be very fast, very cheap, and very secure. And this is partly true because, especially in the beginning, it was very fast and cheap and secure, but at the end of 2017, when the block size, this limit was reached, it was not so fast anymore, and instead of cheap, a transaction costed about $25. So that is the transaction fees that come along with a Bitcoin transaction. With a normal Bitcoin transaction, if you do it right now, the fees are very small. It should be only just a few cents. But if the blocks are completely reaching their limit, then transactions are somehow competing to be confirmed in a block. And then the transaction that is offering a higher transaction fee is the one that gets confirmed first. So like this, the transaction fees are increasing. But that is something that can be resolved in the future. So I still see it as an advantage. Then the independence from government regulations, which is obviously something that I mentioned already 2 times now. And then a protection from inflation of fiat currency, which is in countries like Switzerland not really a big deal because our inflation is very small. But I have looked at some inflation rates in Africa, and I have also traveled to Zimbabwe. And there, of course, inflation was a real problem. So in cases of hyperinflation, you have a direct alternative. People that download a wallet and store some Bitcoin in there can directly start transacting with it. It's a very good alternative. Then there is potential mainstream online use and for international transfers, and we can potentially integrate it in future technologies like virtual reality, the Internet of Things, and robotics. And those are items that I'm also very interested in. I am looking at that, and things go very, very fast. And particularly if we look at something like robotics, a robot can actually own a bit of cryptocurrency. If it owns its own wallet, then it can own cryptocurrency, and by that it can make transactions. Then micropayments, these could open a new market. So you should think of payments like 0.0001 cent in our currency. With us, it's impossible to do it. But if we look at Bitcoin, it is possible to do it. Now, when would you like to do that? Well, maybe if somebody writes an article, or if you make a search in Google and you don't want any advertising, or if there's a transaction between two machines for something, then you might want to incentivize it with a very small payment. And then usually with our traditional currencies we cannot do it, but with Bitcoin we can. And there's a potential of inclusion of the non-bankable population. The numbers are unclear to me. I read 2 billion people, I read 3 billion people, I read 5 billion people, but the conclusion is clear. There is a large amount of people that don't have a bank account, and those are not included in our banking system. So by including them with the Bitcoin system, we would have a more holistic view of our economies. But unfortunately, there are also some drawdowns. So we have I call them challenges. Unfortunately, currently it is not as quick and cheap as it is promoted. Now in the, okay. And Bitcoin, it has a bad reputation. So as we all know, it has been used for drug transactions and other illegal activities. But I think it's just not really fair to say that that is because of Bitcoin, because before Bitcoin there were also illegal activities. The transactions are unfortunately still two-way for mainstream, so I can understand it. I can probably tell everybody here how it works, but if I would try to explain it to my mother, then it is quite complicated. And the decentralization possesses really substantial danger for human error. So if you send a transaction to a wrong address, you cannot ask for it back, because there is no centralized party. There is no third party. If you lost the passphrase, something like a backup of your wallet, then you cannot get it back. Then only a few understand the technical complexity. The open source code, it can be copied, and it is copied already many times. That doesn't really steal your Bitcoins, but it makes more of them, more other cryptocurrencies. The energy requirements of Bitcoin are currently very, very high, so that is also a problem. And there is high volatility in the price, as we discussed.